friends, what's up? Hello, hope you're doing well. My name is Victoria. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about auto-buy authors. For me, when I have an auto-buy author, it is an author who is an absolute favorite and that any new books, I will immediately buy them without reading synopsises or anything like that, and I make their backlists a priority. So that's how auto-buy authors work with me. It's different for everyone, but for me, the auto-buy starts from when you find a book that turns that author into an auto-buy. So all their future books that come out are immediately wanted to buy. So I have quite a few that I'm going to talk about, so we're going to go pretty quickly because I've talked about all of these books on my channel before. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Carla Sorensen. Carla Sorensen became an auto-buy author. The fourth book that I read of her, which was Forbidden, I totally enjoyed the first three books that I read of her, which were the first three books in the Ward Sisters series, but it wasn't until Forbidden and Isabel's character that I became attached, and I knew that Carla Sorensen would be one of my all-time favorite authors and was absolutely anything new that she released I was going to be reading and buying, and that all of her old books, all of her backlist ones that I hadn't read yet, were priorities now. This is a age gap, forbidden, obviously, romance with a single dad who is a former professional fighter and now bought the gym that Isabel works at. And it is adorable. I absolutely love it. It was one of my favorite books of 2021. The next author that we're going to talk about is Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare became an auto-buy for me from the first book that I read of her, which was The Duchess Deal. This was one of my first historical romances ever, and it turned me on to historical romance, and I immediately read the entire rest of this Girl Meets Duke series and then made all of her old books priorities, and I have now read almost all of Tessa Dare's backlist. She hasn't released any new books since I read these books, which is sad, but I have read almost everything she's written now, and I still love her. She is a great intro to historical romance if you're interested in starting historical romance. This is a marriage of convenience with a scarred hero, and their meet cute is awesome. Then the next one we're going to talk about is Sophie Lark. Sophie Lark became an auto-buy for me from the first book also, which was Ivan. Absolutely adored this book. Sophie writes mafia romances, and this book is amazing. It is an assassin who is sent to kill the head of a mafia bratva in Russia, and instead they fall in love. And it is amazing. Sloane is one of the most powerful heroines I have ever read, and their relationship is so perfect for them. I have now read all of Sophie's Brutal Birthright series and am so excited to make my way into Kingmakers. I'm reading it in the order that she says, but I'm waiting for the rest of the Kingmakers audiobooks to come out before I can continue, but so excited. Next one is another author who nobody's going to be surprised about, and that is Sarah J Maas. I went into ACOTAR after a lot of people had already read it. All three books were already out by the time that I read this series, and so I knew that Tamlin was an endgame when I read ACOTAR. So it was very interesting. I had a very different reading experience than a lot of other people, and I enjoyed ACOTAR. I still think it's a really good book, but it wasn't until I read A Court of Mist and Fury that like my life was impacted by Sarah J Maas, and she became one of my all-time favorites, and I still 100% adore this book, and I will now read everything that she's written. I still haven't read all of Throne of Glass. I know, I'm sorry. But I'm afraid. Love Crescent City, that series, and this one. And so, one of my favorites. So the next one is Endurance by Amy Dawes. Amy Dawes became an auto-buy author in her second book. I read Challenge first, and I enjoyed it. But this one, I loved, and I immediately binged the like whole rest of the Harris Brothers series and all the spin-offs afterwards, and she's one of my favorite authors, and I absolutely adore her books and would totally recommend them. They are sports romances that take place in England. They are all famous soccer players in England, and each of their romances are so unique and interesting and full of like such silliness and great family dynamics. This one specifically, they have to fake date, and the heroine is a plus-size doctor who is amazing, and I love her. Would totally recommend them. Absolutely adore Amy Dawes. The next one is Eden Finley. I talk about Eden Finley a lot on my channel. She has a lot of books, and I started with Fake Out, which is the first book in the Fake Boyfriend series, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. But it wasn't until the third book, which is Deke, that she became like a favorite author. This one is so good. It is about, again, Eden Finley writes mostly sports romances, but she does have a couple of series that are not sports romances. But all of her books are MM, and this series specifically are all sports romances, and this one is about a hockey player named Ollie who is closeted, and he ends up accidentally outing himself to a person he doesn't realize is a reporter, but that reporter, Lennon, is such a sweetheart and absolutely would not out somebody that's not who he is, because he's gay himself and he knows that being outed is like incredibly wrong. And so they meet when Ollie is at a dinner with his family, and his family is the kind of family that like really needs him to be in a relationship. And he is like freaking out about it in the bathroom, and Lennon offers basically to be his fake boyfriend for the night. And not thinking that he's ever going to see him again, Ollie's like, please, absolutely, that would be great. And then he sees him again later when Ollie is at a hockey game where he's playing a game, and he sees that Lennon is a reporter, and he is freaking out. And they have a romance, and it's so good. It's so good. I absolutely adore it. Lennon and Ollie are just so perfect for each other. Would totally recommend not just this book, but the whole series. So good. Next one is Always Only You by Chloe Leese. I love Chloe Leese, and I've only read 2 of her books. So this is the first book that I read of hers, and it was one of my favorites of last year. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Absolutely adore it. And Chloe Leese. She became an Autobuys author very quickly, and I am very slowly making my way through her backlist. She has some new releases that I've been going through too. But I really like the way Chloe Leese writes about characters with illnesses and disabilities. I myself have a chronic illness. I have 3 actually, but I really like the way that Chloe Leese has the representation of chronic illnesses in her story. I don't have rheumatoid arthritis like Frankie does in this book, but I do have chronic pain, and I really understood and connected with the way that Chloe Leese wrote about Frankie's dealing with chronic pain, so I became very connected to the character in this book and in With You Forever, which I've also read. And I really enjoyed them. Would totally recommend them. One of her books that I haven't read yet is a Second Chance, Marriage in Trouble. And I don't usually like Marriage in Troubles, but if anyone can do it and make me like it, it's going to be Chloe Leese. So I'm incredibly excited to read the rest of her books. She just announced that she's having an MM one come out. This is the Bergman Brothers series, and the next one in the Bergman Brothers series is going to be MM, which I love. So I'm super excited. Would totally recommend Chloe Leese if you haven't checked her out. We have Lauren Rowe. This is the 3rd book that I read of her. This is the Morgan Brothers series, and this is book 4. 3. I never remember if Mr. Bodyguard or this one comes first. I think I read this one before Mr. Bodyguard. But I read these books back when Audible Escape was a thing. And I started with Hero. And I liked Hero. It was okay. It was good enough for me to continue the series, but it's definitely my least favorite. I got to Captain, which I adored. I gave Captain 5 stars. But this one really solidified Lauren Rowe as a favorite author of mine. I loved her characters with Kean Morgan. Kean Morgan is such a fun character. He is the kind of guy who can make a fun he can make any situation fun, and he has this ridiculous ability to make the most awkward situations so much more comfortable. And as somebody who feels very much secondhand embarrassment in awkward situations in books, I loved the way that he diffused situations and made everything enjoyable and comfortable, and was not afraid to be kind of ridiculous. And this romance is so fun, so would totally recommend. It's sort of like a forced proximity because they are driving on a road trip kind of far from Portland, I think. No, Seattle. They're driving from Seattle to Los Angeles. So it's kind of a long drive, and they're stuck in the car together for the whole time. And they have this great romance, and it's so good. I would totally recommend it. And the rest of Lauren Rowe's books, because I've now read almost all of them. I think I have only one series left that I haven't read yet, so I'm super excited. Okay, so the next one and the last one we're going to talk about in this video is Serena Bowen. Couldn't do an Autobuy favorites without talking about Serena Bowen. I adore Serena Bowen. I've read every single book in her backlist except one, which I'm kind of sort of saving because I don't want to be done with her backlist, if that makes sense. But I adore her. I'm also on her ARC team, so I get all of her new releases. So Autobuy is very easy for me because I get all of her new releases. But I absolutely adore her books. From the first one, which was Brooklyn Air. I read this book. It is still probably my favorite Serena Bowen book. I adore it. And it is one that, I say this every time I talk about this, but how much I love this book, but it is one that when I finished this book, also back on Audible Escape, when I finished the audiobook of this book, I restarted it and then listened to it all over again. And that was the first time I had ever read it, and I have probably read it 10 times since then. I absolutely adore it. It is about a CEO named Nate Kattenberger, who has this company that's kind of like Apple. He's a tech genius, and he has a relationship with his assistant, his like personal assistant. She used to be his personal assistant before he bought a hockey team, the Brooklyn Bruisers, and he sent her to be the basically in charge of the Brooklyn Bruisers hockey team. One day she takes a step onto the ice and slips and hits her head, and Nate kind of freaks out about it, and he wants her to be okay. And she lives with her sister and her sister's husband and their baby. And so her apartment is always very hectic and loud. And Nate offers Rebecca his place and is like, hey, my place is really big and quiet and I'm not there a lot, so why don't you rest up at my place? And it's so good. It's so good. And they are perfect together. Absolutely perfect together. And I have now read every single one of Serena Bowen's books, and I love her so much. So if you haven't read her, would totally recommend her. She writes everything: small town romances, sports romances, romances. So fun. College romances, like amazing. Would totally recommend. Absolutely love her. But that's it. That's the ones that I was going to talk about in this video. I do have a couple of others, but these are the absolute like main ones, like 100% priorities. If they have a new book coming out, I'm going to read it. But that's it for this video, so thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments below who your auto-buy authors, oh, I can't talk, who your auto-buy authors are. But that's it, so give it a like if you liked it, and subscribe so I can see you in my next video. Bye!